Hey, let's thank. There you go. Let's thank. Ta-da. Go. All right. Hey, let's thank. There you go. Let's thank. Ta-da. Go. All right. Hey, let's thank. There you go. Let's thank. Ta-da. Welcome back for another night where Graham and I are having a conversation, Voices from the Heart, as part of Wayside Chapel's Love Over Lockdown series. I feel like we should have a musical intro as we get into about our third or fourth week of this. And thank you for everyone who's logged in. Welcome to anyone who's new, and also hello to everyone who's some of our regulars through this. This is a series where Graham and I are going to be in conversation with people from the front lines working, as well as voices from the streets. And I hope next week we'll be able to bring you some voices of the young people who are going through a pretty rough time through this lockdown as well, but have some amazing stories to share with you. So just before we get kicked on, let me acknowledge that we are broadcasting to you from the land of the Gadigal, Bidjigal and Birrabirragal peoples, and we acknowledge their elders past and present. Also, we acknowledge their connection to land, sea and sky, and their relationships not only to communities past but also to the communities present and ours as well. So thank you to everyone who is logging in, who is of Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander descent. Welcome tonight, everyone. So tonight's topic that we're going to be in conversation around, so Graham and I are going to kind of back and forward a bit, so the format will be a little bit different, which will be I'll talk for a bit, Graham will talk for a bit. Please feel free to send through your questions, just type them there, and we'll get a chance at the end to be able to answer the questions. And if there's a question that is important and urgent, Laura will interrupt us, because we can be two people that can ramble on a bit. But hopefully this will be a great night where we can have share a few of the insights that we have at Wayside, and also share a bit of the wisdom we've gathered along the way, which I can assure you, and Graham would too, we've stolen from others all the time. Also, if you've logged on without a Facebook account, just be aware that you can't participate in the chat function. We're not trying to encourage anyone to sign up to Facebook or social media through this time. It's just know that if you can't get into chat, that's the reason why. But tonight's topic is surviving lockdown the Wayside way. How can we apply some of Wayside's behaviours as we live through these extended lockdowns, particularly those of us who are in New South Wales, but the eastern states. There are some protracted lockdowns, particularly Victoria, and as well as us. So, look, our behaviours come to us from an ecosystem. So our vision is love over hate, and that's beyond us. That's a beautiful statement of the world we want to live in. How can we live in a world where love lives over hate? Our mission of creating community with no us and them, that's always before us. We never own it, we can never create it, we can never manipulate it, we can only be caught up by it. And we recognise it often in the rear view mirror, where we say, wasn't there that moment where we're all caught up in something so much bigger than ourselves, with people who we would have never dreamt would be a part of our tribe. Then we have our values, which we're going to have a night on our values as well, in upcoming soon, which is no secrets, no cowboys, no complacency, no rushes, and no judges. And we look forward to unpacking them with you at some point. But we get to Wayside's behaviours, which is really our user manual, our guidebook on how we interact with each other. And we're going to walk through those 4 behaviours and then tease out some lessons, hopefully, on how we can apply them, for you to apply them at home and in your workplaces through this time. And our 4 behaviours are stand back, speak well, embrace errors, and be kind. So they sound simple, but they're also profound. And if you get an opportunity to put them into play, you'll be creating what I think are unstoppable families and unstoppable workplaces, and which will all contribute to making this world a pretty amazing, special kind of place. So, Graham, welcome. Sorry for that long introduction.
It's cool.
We're going to start with our firm favourite, which is embrace errors. Right. So, talk us through what's the behaviour embrace errors all about?
Can I say just before we jump in that the kind of talk that we're doing tonight is different. We developed this talk primarily as an internal talk. This is not what we go to the world with. This is talk that we have within our team. And it's based on the idea that most of what you do by habit. You think that you're reasoning your way through your life. And mostly you're not. Most of the time you act out of an unconscious way, and often enough you surprise yourself the way that you act. So in order for us to be better people, it's fine to understand the mission and the vision, and it's fine to be able to talk about our values, but it all means nothing if you have habits that make the mission unlikely. So what do we do if you have these habits? So we like to live with many illusions, but the biggest illusion I can think of right now is the idea that you think and make decisions based on how you think. That is complete nonsense. It's not how it works. Very rarely do you use your brain to survey what your options are and then choose your best option. I'm sure it happens 5% of the time. But nearly all the time, what happens is you react from your heart, and then your brain tidies up the circumstances. Nearly all advertising is pitched so that you will make decisions that way. I mean, there's a BMW ad at the moment that says, "Don't think."
Yeah, I saw that.
Just feel.
Yeah.
Well, probably all advertising is pitched that way because they know that you don't think. Your thinking is an exercise that happens that you use to prove to the world why you acted as you already acted. So that's one of the reasons why we say all the time salvation comes through the feet. It's about what you do. If you want to overcome an addiction to the pokies, you can go and study the mechanics and the maths of pokies all your life, but you'll have no victory until your feet walk yourself away from the pub. Salvation comes through the feet, not through the head. So this is a difficult matter. If you're in a small team and you want to be an effective team, at some point or another, we're going to have to confront the habits that we have. Because mostly when you act out of habit. So how do we address this issue of our habits? So that's what tonight's exercise is all about. And that's this kind of talk that we're doing tonight. I never really thought that we would be publicly discussing it. I thought this was language for inside our team. But I think it's probably helpful for everybody. So the first habit.
I mean, we could even probably go off track a little bit and talk about how the ancients approached habits and character formation.
Well, Aristotle says, now that you gave me that, Aristotle says that virtue is right behaviour habituated. In other words, it's not a virtue until you don't have to think about it anymore. Which is why he said, and it's why in ancient times, the children were taught by rote. Just get it into their heads so that it's automatic. And eventually, that's how children will behave and they won't have to think about it. Yeah. So, all right, education's moved on, but the wisdom that says a virtue is right habit, is right behaviour habituated, there's a lot of wisdom in that. So,
I mean, what would the culture say now? It's right feelings.
Oh, gotcha. Sure. I mean, we're a lost culture in lots of ways. But look, the good news is, if we're going to seriously tackle this, then it's not just a case of saying you have a bad habit. It's identifying that there's a habit that's unhelpful, and what would be a new habit? How can we help each other? Because I promise you can't do it on your own. This is locking yourself up in a cupboard and saying, I need a new habit. It's not how it's going to work. We actually need each other. And so in the context of Wayside, it's small teams. You need small teams to be agreeing that we will work together on our habits. We're not trying to run a speech night here, we're trying to run a dance. So that, what you contribute is of course it's of value, but it's only of value if it's modified by others, right? So like in a dance. So, this is a very serious business, and it's a business that we almost never confront because it's awkward, isn't it? So it's a part of what this is about is how do you build a small group or a small team in which you can give each other permission to identify this is a habit that's not helpful. Can we talk about a habit that would be helpful? And can we encourage your bravery for owning up to this habit? So, will I jump in the first one?
Yep.
The first one is embrace your errors.
Yep.
Now look, those words are not going to set the world on fire, and almost everybody will acknowledge that you learn by making mistakes. And where the hell does show me where it's encouraged that you own your mistakes, speak out your mistakes, and allow others to help you learn whatever lesson was involved. Mostly, we spend our time covering our asses. That's a technical term. And look, it doesn't matter Wayside or any place at all, because some of your habits are unhelpful, and we all have unhelpful habits. We almost all have the habit of covering our asses. I made a mistake, oh geez. I'll immediately go into, well, John asked me to do this, he didn't give me enough time. And he didn't spell out the details, and if only he knew what kind of pressure I was under, and da-da-da-da-da. But I won't say that to you, I'll go and say it to somebody else.
Yeah.
And what happens is, in an organisation, in a family, you end up wasting untold time making alliances that comfort you in your rabbit hole rather than help you learn what was that lesson that just passed you by. So we have a very bad habit of getting to right at that point where you could grow as a person and have your skills stretched and your whole being stretched in a good way. We have a habit of ducking at the right moment. And so I couldn't ever exaggerate how much energy is lost. Whole organisations that have the most beautiful, big, world-embracing missions in the world can be totally lost because someone's covering their arse. And everybody else has got to take sides. And you become absorbed in this irrelevant, stupid thing. When what sparked that off was an opportunity to really learn, to really lead the mission. But we missed it, we ducked. So I think, how would you change, am I talking too long?
No, this is good.
As if people telling me to shut up? So I would say, if you, let's say in the context of Wayside, if you've got a small team, you need to have at your staff meeting at least once a month a standing agenda item that says my biggest screw up this month. And if you are a leader of a small team, and look, if you're a parent and you've got teenagers, same sort of deal. If you're a leader of a team, you need to keep your eyes and ears peeled, because when we get to that standing agenda item, so that when somebody owns a screw up, I didn't cover our organisation or me in glory this month because, you need to have eyes peeled to recognise the bravery of that and to say thank you for your bravery. We really appreciate that. Then you can have a discussion that says, well, let's not repeat that. Can I give you one example, then I'll throw it back to you?
Well, there is an example listed here. Did you read the notes?
All right, I'll do that. I once was talking to the chairman of our board, Ian, at the time, and with one of our board members. And I forget what the discussion was, but I chipped in with saying, well, Malcolm Turnbull said A, B, C, D, E. And at the time, Malcolm was the Prime Minister. And not Ian, the other board member said to me, was that an email or did the Prime Minister ring you? And I said, he phoned. Now, the only problem is that was a lie. And I worried all day, why did I say that lie? The truth wouldn't have hurt me. No, neither Ian or the other board member would have thought little of me because it was an email. But I lied. Why did I lie? I think I lied because it bolsters my weak ego to think I had a phone call from the Prime Minister. And that's what I said. So the trouble is, once you know, that you can, isn't it easy to explain that away? Slip of the tongue, it doesn't matter, you know. But I told a lie. That's the truth. I told a lie. And I told a lie in order to make myself look better than I thought I was looking in the eyes of our chair and Ian. So anyway, once you tell a lie, you then have to start worrying about, well, what if this crops up in conversation somehow? And, you know, I've got to cover my ass, you know. And, you know, what if I'm exposed? So this ate me away, this particular day, it ate me away. And eventually, I think probably by early evening, I sent an email to Ian and to the board member, and I said, today I told you a lie. And I don't really know why I did it. I assumed I wanted you to think more highly of me than I thought you did, or something. But it's my insecurity. So I just want you to know I told you a lie, that the Prime Minister didn't call. It was an email. Well, I got an email back from the chair that said, my respect for you has just grown.
There it is. Yeah.
Just think about that for a minute. You know, it wasn't such a big deal, but the act of owning the error, the act of saying, I stuffed this up, I'm disappointed in myself that I stuffed this up, just cleared the air and allowed the chair, whose opinion counts a lot to me, to say, well, that act of honesty says a lot to me. And our relationship, which was fine, got even better after that. It's such an opportunity to learn.
Whenever have you been in a work situation where someone has owned up to an error and you've walked away thinking less of them? It never happens. In fact, it's the opposite.
We shouldn't be too honest. Let's be honest. I would say you could count on two hands the number of times I heard sorry, even at Wayside, in 17 years. Let's be honest with each other. We know that you learn by your mistake. And we're very good at saying to other people, hey, you learn by your mistakes. But I'm not about to tell you the mistake I just made. So you have to model this, and you have to recognise the courage in somebody else. And I think in a small team, you have to give the opportunity. You have to have the agenda item that says, my biggest stuff up this month, and then let people tell you.
Yeah. There is one team on Wayside where it's a standing agenda item.
I love it.
It's the one run by Laura Henry, and she's runs one of the most high-performing teams inside of Wayside. And they have created a culture where it is okay. They call it nuzzle. Yeah. I believe that's the right word. Where people will say, put their hand up and say, I have to do a nuzzle. Yeah. And which means I just nuzzle into my error. I own it. I embrace it. I share it here, so we can move on and learn from it. Now, here's the clinker, and we probably could do 4 of these on each of the 4 behaviours. How does embrace errors apply to our family life?
It's
all right. To lockdown, life in lockdown. Because as a dad, I feel like I've got to be right. I've got to be large and in charge in the family.
That's the problem.
Yes.
But that's the problem at work. That's the problem at home. All the time, you want to speak with more authority than you actually have. You know, it's
I'm laughing because it's so embarrassingly true what you just
yeah,
said.
well, I'm quoting Homer Simpson, who says it's so funny because it's true.
Yeah.
It's you know, I find, you know, even in my home, I don't have to struggle with teenagers. But even in just talking to Robin can ask an innocent question. I'll give an answer with great authority that I haven't got. I haven't got it. And it's the only healing for that is to say, look, I just said A, B, C, D, E, but I actually don't know that. Can I rephrase it? Can you give me a chance to rephrase it? And then I'll say it in a better way. And you know what we're talking about here, if you catch it, is so bloody liberating, which is why our marketing team have built an unbeatable team. Because they've discovered the liberation that comes in saying, I stuffed up. And you know, because this is a habit. This has happened over years. This wasn't happened last week. Over years, there's a habit in the team that says, when I stuff up, I can own it, and my team will appreciate me for owning it, and then we'll have a discussion about how we don't repeat that mistake. It's easy to say things like you'll build an unbeatable team. But you only build an unbeatable team if you form a habit like that one. Embrace your errors.
Excellent. Yeah, great. Next behaviour. Let's get on to it. That is speak well. Right, so the next one, next habit is is speaking well. Words are so powerful. We create worlds with our words. Words create worlds. You know, there's something called declarative speech. Once I've said something, even though it's just sounds that have come out of my mouth, something has changed in the world. What are some declarative statements that change the world? I love you. When you first say that to someone, your world has changed forever. Not only your world, but everyone's world, you and the person. I hate you. That changes the world in a moment. I marry you. That completely changes your world. What's happened that's different? Nothing, but everything has changed as well. Words are powerful, and words create new horizons of possibility or shut down avenues of inquiry as well. It's important that we speak well. You know, as a youth worker and community worker for the time I was in before Wayside and now in Wayside, I can see the power that words have to heal, and words have the power to create new ideas and new horizons, particularly for many who have never had powerful, loving words spoken into their lives. I remember once when I was working at the local high school, there was a young girl and we ran a leadership. Me and a guy called Stuart O'Brien, a good mate of mine who grew up in Bidwell, got together and said, let's start a leadership development program for kids in this school, because I remember the most exceptional young man graduated high school and he was a powerful leader, respected amongst his peers, and I bumped into him at a local takeaway shop at the end of year 12, and I was lucky enough to grow up and attend a private high school, and anyone with even half his charisma would have been given every single career development opportunity made possible, the power through those networks. And I bumped into him at the end of year 12 and he was in a high-vis vest and he said, John, are there any jobs in your factory? And we thought, no, there's got to be more out there for kids like him, for leaders like that young man. So we started this group called a leadership group in the high school, and we just picked 10 kids from HSC from both years saying who has the most potential in this space. And you know, it was a pretty simple program. We introduced them and we took them around to different businesses and different factories, because a lot of the kids and not just factories but industries that were around the place, just to expose kids to what are some of the possibilities out there. And one of our young leaders, she was a beautiful young woman, and one day as we were, Thursday afternoons was our time and that the school gave for that program, and she ran in all kind of dishevelled, and she hadn't been at school all day, but she made it to the office for this leadership course, but it was clear that she was not really in a state to be able to attend the class. She'd been crying, there was her hair was really messy, and she was there was bruising, and she was also bleeding from a few cuts on her, and we finally, after half an hour, she sat down and sobbed, and her story kind of came out, and it wasn't just what had happened, but it was about her life, and she was the oldest of a 7-kid family, and she was the most responsible member of that family, and her parents kind of held that together by telling her how useless she was, you know, and they were quite abusive to her, and they kept telling her, you know, if you tell anyone what happens outside of these walls, docs will come in and you'll tear apart this family and it'll be your fault forever. And every night her reality for this kid was to cook and clean and feed all her younger siblings, to make them do their homework, to bathe them, to clean their school bags, to prepare their lunches, to get them to school the next day. And then after that, she would have to clean the house, do the dishes. God knows where her parents were at that time. I mean, they were usually at the pub. And and after she finished cleaning the house, then she could do her homework. And then she would collapse into bed and come to school the next day. We didn't know any of this. And then it was that day that we were with her. It was at the end of the day, she was cleaning up. She found some nail polish of her mum's under the couch, and she picked up a bit of the nail polish and just put it on her fingers before she went to study. And as she was studying, her mum walked in and she was talking, and her mum noticed that she'd used her nail polish, and I don't know what happened or what came over her mum, but she said, "Did you use my nail polish?" She said, "Yeah, mum. Don't I look pretty?" And her mum just lost it and began to yell at her and say, "I don't know, you know, you are the opposite of pretty, you are ugly." And I'm not going to get into the flowery language that she used, but it just kind of escalated till the dad came home, and he lost a bit on the pokies that night, and they began to hit her, and then they said, and then it kind of escalated to the point where they grabbed a pair of scissors and kind of hacked away at her hair. And it was just such a, I mean, you couldn't script cruelty like that. And she wept and wept and wept, and then eventually stumbled to this course in the afternoon. And, you know, we had the welfare worker and the social worker, and I was there, and we thought, you know, what intervention needs to happen now? And, you know, there's always the mandatory reporting that needs to happen, but we thought there's something more needs to happen in this moment. And I called my hairdresser from the Mount Druitt shops at the time, and she knew exactly what to do. And she just started her business. She was working hard, but when I called, she could hear the worry in my voice, and she immediately came to, closed up her shop, came, and she's, you know, classic kind of hairdresser, big hair, lots of makeup, lots of earrings. You can hear her and smell her before you see her. And she kind of came into the room and looked at this young girl and just collapsed to her knees. And she began to stroke her hair, and kind of cooed. And then gently pulled out some scissors and gently just began to cut her hair a little bit, not so it would be so obvious that her parents would know what had happened. You know, that she'd had it fixed up or that she'd talked to anyone, and she just gently stroked her face, and then she just looked at her and held a mirror to the side of her face where you couldn't see some of the bruising and the tears, and she said, "Look at yourself. Don't let anyone ever tell you that you are the most gorgeous creature that was put on the face of this earth." You know, there was a lot of great social work and community work and development work going on, but none more important thing happened that day than what that lady did for that young girl. And I'd like to tell you that that was a moment that turned her life around, but it wasn't. But it was the moment where a new possibility was born in her heart. And it was a few months later that she made the decision that she could no longer go on living in that situation. And it was a few months later that she moved out with a few friends and we helped her get some housing. And her completely changed the course of her life slowly, but it all began in that moment where a new set of words was spoken to her. How does that apply to us? Is every moment we can speak words of life or words of death over people. If we're looking for what's wrong, we'll find it every time. But if we're looking for what's right, we'll find it every time as well. I used to take my our eldest out to Maccas when Lisa was away. Don't tell Lisa. And we used to just sit there, and I remember the first time I did it, it was just me and her in the booth, and I'd feed her chips and let her dip and make a huge mess. And I once said to her, you know, I love you. You are such a beautiful kid. And she said, more, Daddy. And so I thought she meant more burgers, so I gave her more burgers. She said, no, Daddy, more. And so we started this little routine where I would just describe one more aspect of why she was such an amazing, beautiful creature. And, you know, of all the memories I have of childhood, they're the ones that are most precious. And they're the ones I come back to now that they're 17 and 18 years old, and I'm just so bent on seeing what's wrong with them and what they need to be doing through this time. We can apply it if we make it a habit of calling out the good. And that's a very powerful practice and habit that we can develop in our families too through this lockdown.
Speak up your colleagues behind their back, make that a habit, and you will be a countercultural force of nature.
Why do we as Australians think that the smartest person in the room is the one who has the biggest put downs for people behind their backs? You know, I mean, there's no more miserable position than being the smartest person in the room. But, you know, there's this Australian workplace culture that we always get caught up in talking to people behind our backs. In fact, we're still doing it on Zoom, and everyone's greatest fear is that you're going to hit everyone when you put that mean and nasty comment into the reply. Why do we do that? A few years ago, I did start adopting the practice and the habit of speaking up about people behind their backs. And once or twice I've made that error where I've hit everyone or I've hit reply all to the email. And it's been a joy. And I would like to think that the impact that has is people say, oh, that person's got my back. And I feel safer enough to then go on and embrace my errors.
Once again, it's good news, but it's hard to convince people that it is good news because we have a bad habit. So-and-so's lovely, isn't she? Yes, except for... And it's nothing other than we're bolstering ourselves and in the process depleting ourselves, actually. So to foster this habit of speaking up your colleagues behind their back, speaking up with family members behind their back, it doesn't mean you have to live in fairyland where you don't name difficulties because a friend stabbed you in the front. You know, that's completely different. So this is a revolutionary habit if you have a team of people, family of people, team of people who are willing together to try and form a good habit of speaking each other up behind the back. That's good.
I mean, you get a refund on all this. You can just go and act on your feelings and talk about people behind their backs in a negative way too. But you know, that seems to be the simple way of going about things, right?
But you so deplete yourself. You know, you must. Do you know somebody who's? How many people do you know whose whole life is about passing judgments on someone who happens to be not here? Well, what they're doing is emptying themselves of substance. It's a trap. It's a big trap.
All right. Graham.
Me. Okay.
We are doing well, baby. We've got to talk about standing back. We got
a
couple of minutes for you and a couple of minutes for me.
All right. Are we going too slow? We probably are we?
Yeah.
Okay. So
yes.
Standing back. This habit we've named standing back. I want you to think of a time. Which camera am I talking to? Great. I want you to think of a time in your life when you flourished at your best, where you think, well, that was a time when I was really alive and flourishing. I promise you that no matter what was going on, in that moment you were necessary to the situation, significant in the situation, but not central. it wasn't all about you. You flourish at your best when you are necessary, significant, not central. So, you know, look at somebody who's in love. You know, when they're flashing new wedding rings or engagement rings, each one knows that they are necessary to this new love, significant in this new love, but they each know it's not all about them. It's not about how they feel. And you know, these people are fully alive, and time stops. You know, ask someone in love to make sure they're home by 11 and see what that means. Nothing. It means nothing. So in order for us to be necessary, significant, not central, what we have to do is catch ourselves regularly in the default position where we're constantly central, when it's about us. Because it's a guaranteed formula for misery, when it's all about you. You know, I used to, every Friday, Robin and I would take our grandchildren from school and take them home. We had the time of our lives, the highlight of our week, every week. And they eventually one day decided they were going to live in Braidwood, out the back of nowhere. Not even God knows where Braidwood is. And so this habit of mine suddenly fell over, and I wasn't seeing the children every Friday, and I was really upset. I was hurt. This was the highlight of my life. And it took me a couple of weeks to remember that this isn't all about me. I'm just the old grandfather. And eventually I saw these kids move and become country bumpkins, and now they've got sheep and horses, and it's better. And it's and whatever I let this be about me, misery is a guarantee. I can write you a misery. And look, when you're central, you'll find that the most important task in front of you is to be able to express how you feel about whatever it is. But when you're necessary, significant, but not central, you'll have the freedom to ask, well, what facts do I not know? Where can I go that would get some clarity on what this situation is? And you'll make it better because it's not all about you. When it's all about you, your misery is assured. It is absolutely guaranteed. So what we need is to develop a habit of standing back. So what should be central? Well, if you're working at Wayside, what's central is the mission. To create community with no us and them. So here I am busy in my little work team trying to create community with no us and them, and John comes in and says, you know what, this team was more effective when we had half the people in it 5 years ago. How do I feel? I straight away think, well, come down here and do it yourself. You know, I get cranky, it's all about me. I want to defend myself. If I can allow the mission to be central, I'll say to myself, well, has John got a point? And what's going on? And what question should I go back to John with? Because I may have misunderstood this, because all I've been doing is get cranky. So this is how do we help one another? Because you won't do it on your own. How do you help one another stand back and say, well, actually, let's make the mission central. And then I will flourish because I'll be necessary to it, significant in it. But it's not all about me. And that's the only way you will do well. And the truth is, if we're going to be truthful with each other, our default position is to make whatever it is central. For a lot of us, if the harbour bridge fell over, we'd think it was our fault. You know, it's just what we do. So we need to, if we're ever going to flourish, we need to help one another stand back. So, you know, in the life of the church, the history of the church is, someone's upset because we had a Lamington drive and some idiot minister ran over my Lamingtons. Or, you know, I've been putting the chairs out for 30 years, no one ever said thank you. You know, all that silly shit, all that silly stuff is what becomes central when you allow yourself to become central. And yet, if you can stand back and find yourself to be part of something that's bigger than you and more wonderful than you, you'll actually fly, you'll flourish. So it's worth having a how do we help each other stand back.
Beautiful. Thank you. I'll quickly go. Be kind. I'm not going to take too long on there. We'll go for an extra 5 minutes to answer questions if that's all right with you. Thanks. But be kind. It won't go for long. It's pretty self-explanatory. But here's the thing, right? It's so beautiful to be involved in having a mission that is so much bigger than anything you could ever dream of. And that goes for organisations, it goes for families, it goes for any kind of team whatsoever. But there's nothing worse than being fanatical. Being so fanatical about the mission that it becomes the central focus at the exclusion of all else. Be kind was brought in because there was a point, there are times in our history where we lose sight, we lose focus, and we're so focused on the mission that we are so kind to everyone out there, we forget to be kind to each other. And kindness is that gift. Kindness helps pull us back, helps remind us that how we do anything is how we do everything. And so it's just simple practices of kindness. In fact, those acts that seem almost meaningless and worthless, and I will say we did develop it for being kind to each other as we are on a mission together. But we can, as a family, become so focused on a goal. We're going to be the greatest sporting family ever, that we can lose the ability to be kind with each other. And I have used examples from work and family, but one of the beautiful, most powerful examples of kindness is from one of our team members, Annalise. She's just an angel, and she would regularly. There's an older gentleman who is a pretty chronically sopping wet alcoholic in our neighbourhood, and he would regularly come in, yell at everyone, abuse everyone, and just shit his pants. And it would be her who would just kindly take him carefully to the bathroom, strip off his pants, hose him down, dry him up, and put on a brand new pair of pants. So no one would notice. She would never tell anyone. But that's how she'd spend an hour, at least once or twice a week. I mean, it's just those acts that just kind of catch you in the heart.
There's a massive difference between being focused and being a crusader.
Yes.
Crusaders look like they're focused on the mission, but they're not. They're on some kind of personal crusade, which is why I used to say at Wayside, how come you've got endless patience for the homeless people and you've got zero patience for your colleagues?
Someone ate my grapes at lunch.
It's an opportunity to work out, and at times it's a really good thing for us, all of us, to be confronted with we're really a big fat phony. And you're a good person, you've got a lot to offer, but we need to help one another say, well, it doesn't matter how hard you spill a sweet cup of water, it's still sweet water. Anyway.
I think kindness helps us pull each other back from the brink, because I think we all have a bent if we're in this kind of game to go to live at the edge of life and forget
this gift that we have, because we're all existentialists. We all think the world should be giving us a round of applause because
absolutely
brought the Grandness of God into the world. But the truth of the matter is, the Grandness of God is actually only useful when we're doing a dance.
Yeah.
If you just leave it to go out on its own, that's called dementia. But when we're involved together in a dance, that's when it really comes into its own.
Yeah.
And really makes a fabulous contribution. Anyway.
Beautiful.
Sorry.
Now we have some questions. All right. We're going to need a bit larger text than that.
Another question.
Timmy, how are you, Tim? All right. Hello, Graham and John. I'd love to jump on board for a future live stream. I know you've got a story to tell. We'll be in touch, Tim. We'll look forward to hearing it. While we're getting the next question, I just want to say, hey, how about a challenge? How about an act of kindness? I would love for you to, between now and next Thursday, just perform one random act of kindness and let us know. Or say something kind, say something positive. I mean, there are some families where negativity is such the part of the culture of the family that if you say something positive, everyone will think you're high, but give it a go. Break down that barrier and see what happens. It'll take a bit of courage. I love that quote from Rilke. Dragons are the things that guard our greatest treasures. The fears of the dragons that guard our greatest treasures. I just love that quote. It has some depth to it. And take a risk. Sarah Donaldson, do you have a Bible reference for stand back? Oh.
Pretty much cover to cover. Stay with 1 Corinthians 13 for a while. If I speak with tongues of men and angels, but have not love, I'm a resounding gong. I'm basically noise pollution.
Yeah.
If I had faith that could move mountains, but without love, it's nothing. Love is patient, love is kind, blah, 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 blah. Sit with 1 Corinthians 13, but there's plenty of them. Plenty of them.
And these three things remain: faith, hope, and love. John and Graham, how do you maintain your own individuals of levels of mental health? Well, I don't claim they're very high, but it's to begin with. But two things really I just quickly share on that point is, my wife used to be involved in something called GROW, which is the 12-step mental health groups, and a really wonderful program that I recommend you all check out. And it basically starts with the premise that we're all broken. We all have a level of brokenness within us, and that shared brokenness helps actually release me from the need to be whole and perfect, and helps me recognise my own brokenness. I also have an ability to recognise my own limits. Last weekend, it just kind of all piled up on me, and I expressed it by saying I didn't have a fake smile left in me. So I rang up Graham and said, Graham, can you just cover me for Sunday? I knew I just needed a rest. I needed just to recharge. At the time, the sun was still shining, and I just spent a couple of hours just by myself sitting in the sun. So I know my limits, and we've all got them. And I'm learning as I get older to respect them a little bit.
Yeah, my answer to that is just a little bit different, and that is I can be feeling as flat as a pancake, but I know if I keep myself into the dance, people will give me the energy. They'll give me energy I never had. So, there's no such thing as a single human being. We're only become whole human beings when there's at least two of us. So that's part of my mental health.
Well, Scotty, our mate Scotty's asked a cracker of a question. How would you deal with someone who thinks they're perfect and wants to demand that you follow their way even if it's wrong? Scotty, I know who you are, brother, and we love you. It sounds like you've got teenage kids. No. No. Look, I think the energy with which someone interacts with you is quite telling, right? If there's an energy that has inquisitiveness, curiosity, and suggestions, I would go with that, right? Hey, how about this or that? I'm not necessarily that kind of person to fix or suggest, and I'll really offer a solution, but even when people ask me. But if somebody's demanding that you move to their agenda, it's really not about them. It's not about you.
Yeah, I'd say to Scott, mate, nobody thinks they're perfect. That's the real story. The real story is they're making up for a sense of deep imperfection. And so they're trying to cover that up to convince you so that you won't see the vulnerability. And that's how they cope. So if you could catch them red-handed and say, see, I've got you, you've just been a very imperfect human being, what would happen? Well, they'd double up. They'd make you, they'd only get worse.
Yeah.
So don't play that game. Just know the truth that this person is not perfect and they're very uncomfortable about it, but they think they can snow you and the rest of the world by making an argument.
Yep,
well, don't waste your time with the argument.
Yep.
Just know what the truth
If they're trying to fix you, they're really just trying to not even fix themselves, they're trying to avoid feeling pain.
Yeah.
Lee Cooper, this is the last one, and I'll give it to you. G'day, Lee, mate. We say sorry. Doesn't forgiveness make you feel better? Is it important to share how the apology has changed you to be more than a guilt reliever?
Do you understand the question?
Well, we say sorry. Forgiveness makes you feel better, right?
To me, saying sorry is about getting proper proportion again. Or put it this way, the inability to say sorry is to create an unbearable world where you spend 90% of your words are about making your own case. And I hate to crack it to you if you're in your 90s and you've spent 90% of your words to make your own case, you've largely wasted your life. So to say sorry is a relief.
And I would jump in there and say, if you're just in that cycle of confessing and having someone absolve, and that becomes quite a fun cycle, and it doesn't actually create any change. You know, I've been naughty again, I've been naughty again, I've been naughty again. We'll say 6 prayers or 5 Hail Marys. I mean, we've done that dance 1,000 times. I think what Lee is pointing towards there is the demanding work of change, which is always possible in every moment. And I think you're absolutely right, Lee. It's important to be able to share after the fact how the apology changed you as a person and changed your future behaviour and your future self.
I put the emphasis on all real living is meeting. All real living is meeting. Everything else is making your case. So I wouldn't get too caught up with forgiveness and apologies, except to say you're alone, and unless you are meeting. And if you're meeting somebody, you're really fully alive. I'm going to pass this one. This has been so useful. Thank you, Carolyn. Maybe there should be a Wayside School of Organisational Management. Who would listen? That's what I'd like to know. Have often thought some organisations get so caught up in their mission, but they treat their staff badly. It isn't really worth it. Look, Carolyn, what I'd say to that is most organisations at some point or another get caught up in turning the wheels, and the mission, it actually evaporates. If you're treating each other badly, then your mission is just a statement on the wall. It's not actually a living mission. If your mission's living, it ought to check your behaviour all the time. So in our case, to create community with no us and them, something's seriously wrong if we're treating each other badly.
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you, it's a balance, right? Just to finish up tonight is to say it's always in tension with each other. You have to focus on both, which is one is staying true to the mission, keeping it front and centre, but also balancing around how do we care for each other in that space. And I think we're always existing between those two poles, and the pendulum will swing. But thank you everyone for logging in. Hey, it's been another great conversation. I think we're getting better at actually talking to each other instead of just ripping off for our soapboxes. Next week though, please log in. We're going to have, I'm really looking forward to it in a very Wayside way because I don't know what to expect. We're going to have some kids from our Wingspan project here, some amazing young people with some amazing stories and some amazing lessons to teach you and me about Voice's life on from a completely different place that many of us have ever experienced. So look forward to seeing you. Thanks for logging in. See you next week.
See ya.